pet parents, and welcome to another episode of Natural Pets TV. I'm Robert Semro, and I am joined by Heidi Nevela, Dr. Liz Bales, and Dr. Ken Tudor. Thanks for being here. Now, everything we do in really every sense, not only for ourselves but also for our pets, begins with the foundation of nutrition. When it comes to cats, Dr. Liz, where do you start with nutrition?
This is a great topic because I think if you put 100 pet professionals in a room, you'd probably come up with 100 different answers. So I like to start all the way back at the basics. And in saying that cats are obligate carnivores. What that means is they really need to eat meat and fat to use for energy. That's it. That's what they can use. That said, some carbohydrate in their diet is okay, depending on who you ask. So there's a fantastic study where they took different ratios of fat, carbohydrate, and protein and exposed cats to it and let them choose. And almost uniformly, the cats would choose 50% protein, 40% fat, and 10% carbohydrate. So cats seem to know instinctively what the best mix of those macronutrients is for them. So they took it a step further and made that particular ratio the least tasty, and cats still chose it. So we know that that ratio of protein, fat, and carbohydrate is what cats need and choose to feel best. How you deliver that, that's where things get tricky.
I definitely agree with that because that's where we get into the conflicts of raw versus cooked homemade, homemade versus commercial, and all of those trigger points when people talk about nutrition for their cats. And unfortunately, a lot of that discussion is necessary because you talked about macronutrients. We've got to make sure we're providing micronutrients as well, which is the vitamins, minerals, but in the case of the cat, the essential fatty acid, arachidonic acid, and taurine, some of these things that they are not able to produce themselves, which then we can't just rely on food. We can't just rely on recipes gleaned from the internet or books to fulfill those needs. And I think you have some strong opinions with regards to nutrition and what cats need in addition to the macros and micros.
Yeah, well, I don't know the percentage of dry kibble feeders, but I think it's over
about 70.
Yeah,
about
okay,
70.
70%. So there's synthesized vitamins and minerals, but maybe not the right ratios, and they're not bioavailable, and that's what I have an issue with. So we have whole food bioavailable supplements. We've got different formats. We have powders and capsules. They're all pelletized for cats, but they've got those trace minerals, those micro and macro minerals. They have a very strong protein, low carb, low glycemic index profile of it, and they've got the fat, the omega-3s, digestive enzymes, pre and probiotics. Those are all part of the mix, so it's giving a live food that you can add to like a topper, any kind of diet. It doesn't matter, there's no restriction to that. And we've got different formats for people just getting familiar with an option like a topper. We've got a 2 weeks, a 2-week intro, or we've got a 2-month supply. There's just a lot of options. And they're not just the nutritional, and they get a little more specific too, but they're all cat-driven, cat-specific palatability too.
So there's a lot of different options that we can turn to in nutrition, but as we talk about a foundational basis, I think you set the foundation there in the core, but for a cat parent, when they're looking at what things I absolutely have to be doing, where do you start with them, and what kind of guidance do you give them when it comes to that build from that foundation?
Again, if we have a room of 100 veterinarians, we'll have 100 different answers. For me, it's not only the ratio of protein, fats, carbohydrates, but also because of the cat's unique overactivity of its inflammatory system. When we increase protein in their diet, we necessarily, or flesh-based protein in their diet, we necessarily increase omega-6s in their omega-6 fatty acids. This allows then for an overreactivity of the inflammatory response. And so I think what a lot of parents aren't aware of is adding those omega-3s that Heidi talked about to pull and balance that omega-6 overload, if you will, for their unique nutritional needs.
And where do you find that the best resource is to get an omega-3 to add to the diet that you're using?
Here and I, Heidi, are going to disagree a little bit because I am a big believer in fish oil. And the reason I like fish oil is the EPA and DHA, which are the specific omega-6s or 3s we're concerned with regards to the diet, are in a preformed state. The body can take it and immediately use it. Seed and vegetable-based omega-3s are not readily available in a preformed state, and so the body has to convert it. Unfortunately, mammals do a very poor job of converting undifferentiated fatty acids.
I like the fish oil form as well, but I don't have a lot of exposure to the plant-based form.
And I have no real problem with it. It's just the digestibility is there. There's other nutritional and plant chemicals built into the one that I'm a fan of, the sachichi, and it's also got an anti-inflammatory and immunologic aspect to it. So that's good for the moderation you're talking about, specific to omega-3 and 6. But it's also whole food based, and there's no rancidity issue. That's one, that's another one that people bring up.
And it is a good point, because not all fish oil is created equal.
Correct.
And how it is harvested and processed, the heavy metals issue, it can be a bit complicated. So finding a source that you're really comfortable with and feel safe is important.
And addressing that rancidity issue, one of the things that I think is extremely important that people know, especially if they're using commercial dry products, is to never purchase food that is going to last longer than 45 days, because then they are going to get into rancidity issues of the oils in those commercial dog or cat foods.
I think that's a great point, and I also want to touch on storage, proper storage, because that is something that I think a lot of folks also just aren't aware of.
So it depends on whether you're talking about, canned, of course, should have an expiration date on it. I don't have a lot of familiarity with raw, so it's not something I can speak really comfortably about. There are some food safety issues with raw that people should know, that when you're using a raw meat product, it's possible that it could be contaminated, and so making sure that you clean your hands and the serving vessels really well. Should be doing that in any case, but in particular sensitivity to it with raw, it's something to be aware of.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, the FDA just came out to try and strengthen their rules with regards to contamination, because right now ground chicken products are allowed to 50% of ground chicken products from slaughterhouses are allowed to be contaminated with E. coli, listeriosis, or salmonella.
And I think that it's important for people to understand that as vets, we want what's best for animals, but we have an obligation to make sure that we inform about public health. So we're not here to condemn anything, but just to make people aware that there's an extra measure of caution, particularly if there's children, immunocompromised people in the house, the elderly, to make sure that you're safe. It's just a matter that people should know about.
One of the things I like to always say, and I just want to get your opinion on this, is the best food for your pet is the food that your pet does best on. Is that something that, as a diverse panel, we can all agree on, or
I think so.
Is there something else you'd add to it?
And that you can manage. If you're a person who is away for long hours or even overnight, raw is going to be something that's going to be difficult to be safe with, maybe even wet. That there's lots of cats who've lived long and healthy lives on dry. The jury's really out. We don't have a lot. We can't say this is the study that says this one thing is best. What someone's personal experience with it is important, and how their pet did on it is really important. But it's really impossible for me as a veterinarian to say, I can see this study and tell you for sure this is the way to go.
Well, as you can see, there is a lot to know, and we will continue the discussion on nutrition in future episodes. Thank you for joining us here on Natural Pets TV. Hey everybody, thanks for joining us on Natural Pets TV. We want to keep the conversation going in the comment section down below, or you can always reach out to us at petworldinsider.com. You can get more information from our great guests by reaching out to them as well. Heidi Nevela at naturapets.com, Dr. Liz Bale at nobowlcat.com, and Dr. Ken Tudor at welldogplace.com. Let's keep this going. Let us know what you want to be talking about, what you want to hear from us. Thanks again for joining us, and don't forget to hit that like button.